So I think at the heart of much of what we do will be the role of automation. AI and agents are going to take on a significant portion of the day-to-day activities and the heavy lifting that knowledge workers have been performing, whether you're an engineer or a strategist or an earned media professional. But the curation layer will be the decider between success and failure. So the human curation, the understanding of what the model needs to do, the understanding of what good looks like, the understanding of when it's right to take something to a client or to make a recommendation and when you need to go back and ask another question. That is a uniquely human exercise that I don't see going away anytime soon. So I think humans as curators, as advisors are going to be around for a very long time. I think machines are going to get more and more powerful at the automation.
Hi, I'm Boaz, founder and CEO of Augmented AI Labs, and I'm excited that you're tuning in to the Shift AI podcast, a show that explores what it takes to thrive and adapt to the changing workplace in the digital age of remote work and AI. In today's episode, I'm thrilled to welcome Brian Buchwald, who leads AI strategy and product development at Edelman, the world's largest communication firm. Brian brings in impressive background spanning across investment banking, ad tech giants like DoubleClick, digital media at NBC Universal and Hulu, and entrepreneurship, where he built and sold an advanced analytics business that helped Western brands understand Chinese consumers through social and e-commerce data. Now at Edelman, Brian is pioneering how AI transforms both internal operations and client services at a global scale. With 7,000 employees worldwide and a client roster featuring many of the world's leading brands, Edelman offers a fascinating window into how large enterprises are implementing AI across their organizations. If you're interested in understanding how AI is revolutionizing the communications industry, or how the balance between automation and human curation is evolving in knowledge work, you won't want to miss this conversation. We also want to send out a special thank you to Augmented AI Labs for sponsoring this episode. This is going to be a great show as we explore the intersection of AI, communications, and trust with Brian. Let's get to it. All right, Brian, it is so good to chat with you today. Thank you for being on the Shift AI podcast. It's great to have you.
It is my pleasure, Boaz. Great to be here.
All right. Well, I'm calling, as you can see in my background, the audience is used to seeing me in the studio, but today I'm calling you from HumanX, which is a conference in Las Vegas on the future of work and AI. So it's apropos to the conversation that we're going to have today. I want to start by hearing a little bit about your background. You and I were both in San Francisco roughly the same time, starting our career. I know you were at Morgan Stanley at the beginning of it all, but tell me how you have kind of moved to your current position at Edelman, and then talk a little bit about your role once you get there.
Yeah, absolutely. So I started my career in the tech business from the banking side and pretty quickly moved into the ad tech space at a company called DoubleClick in the early 2000s before it was sold to Google. Spent most of my early career in the ad tech space at companies like DoubleClick and PointRoll. Wound up shifting into digital media at NBC Universal and then with Hulu and then back to NBC, who was an original launch partner and equity owner in Hulu. And then by 2012 or so, I realized I could no longer work for anybody else, needed to be my own boss and start my own company. The path included a few different pivots, but we wound up with a really interesting advanced analytics business, helping Western brands understand Chinese consumers using big data coming from China's major social and e-commerce platforms. I sold that business to Interpublic Group, or IPG, where they housed it within Weber Shandwick, which is the second largest communications firm in the world. Within Weber, I wound up globalizing the technology we had created, but also running their analytics and research and data science practice. One of our key partners was a company called Talkwalker, which is a leading social listening, social intelligence company. Wound up leaving Weber after my earnout to join this company as chief strategy officer. Our biggest customer was the biggest communications firm in the world, Edelman. So at this really interesting point, a few years ago, when a lot of companies were decreasing their spend in our space in technology, in social data, et cetera, Edelman was increasing its spend and putting more capital on the line in innovation and digital innovation. I thought that was really interesting. I had a chance to meet with Matt Harrington, who's the company's president, and then Richard Edelman, our CEO. and wound up joining just a little over 2 years ago to build out our own proprietary um, products and tech stack, and then eventually leading our AI efforts.
That's great. I mean, I'm excited because you guys are operating at such scale now. And, this season has been a lot about big companies deploying AI internally. And I know that you're trying to figure out where AI fits in internally for this massive, communications company, but also for all your clients too. So maybe talk to the audience about that, both the internal stuff that you guys are doing, and then also how you're thinking about this for your clientele.
The most fascinating time I've had in my career, and I probably for most of us, it's at Edelman. We think about AI really through four different lenses. The first is, how do we build proprietary capabilities that give us competitive advantage over our peers? The second is, how are we leveraging AI to transform the way we perform our work every day for our clients? How does it make us more efficient? How does it make us more effective? The third is, how are we helping our clients directly transform their businesses, both from an advisory perspective with AI, but also in product development? How do we help them design new products and services that they can bring to market or make themselves more efficient and more effective? And lastly is something a little bit broader, which is more general for the industry. How do we use AI to better prove the business value of communications, which is the industry that we're in? There's a little joke inside the company that a lot of people go into communications in large part because they hate math. Well, math has come for communications, and AI is really this enablement mechanism now to really not just prove the value of the work, but actually optimize the value as well.
Yeah, it's really, really interesting. Well, let's start with some examples. Like, what kind of things internally are you seeing that has a lot of return on investment for you guys? Where's the manual work happening? And maybe talk like historically about how you guys got work done and how that's changing.
Yeah, I mean, I can give you a few different examples. The first is around trust. So Edelman for 25 years has been investing in trust through something called the Trust Barometer. Every year at Davos, we give a big presentation, and then we cascade that over the year with a series of different really interesting quantitative research and qualitative research around trust. A few years ago, prior to the launch of ChatGPT, the company had started to invest in something called TrustStream. TrustStream was a way in which we could quantify the value of trust for brands and then actually make that data actionable. I came on to the Edelman team to actually lead this endeavor. What we found by the time I joined in early, essentially 2023, was the rise of generative AI or large language models that were just fundamentally shifting how we would score content, how we could understand trust within audiences, how we could dimensionalize trust from kind of bigger, broader corporate trust into the specific articles or social posts that were either engendering or diminishing trust in a particular brand or executive. And what we effectively did, Boaz, was create our own LLM for open source that's enabled us to more accurately score trust, to make it more actionable, and actually predict trust changes with like 97% accuracy. So for us, it's put us in a very different position with our clients as to how we can actually use trust as a key, not just understanding or benchmark of performance, but actually as something we can predict and optimize. More prosaically, something like quantitative research. We have worked with a major technology company where previously we would do roughly 400 hours of manual work on behalf of this client in not just running the research, but then essentially sifting through large in-depth interviews and surveys to get to findings. We've taken that 400-hour research project down to roughly 8 hours through the use of generative AI. So, that would be an example of not just obviously providing more value because we can get to the answer more powerfully, but actually obviously creating lots of efficiencies, meaning we can do this just much faster and better for our clients.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's a significant amount of efficiency gain. But I want to dive into trust a little bit more because I just recently heard a presentation in Seattle of the trust report. Very, very interesting across lots of different sectors in society, lots of different demographics. Some of it was political, some of it was corporate, some of it was the way that we think about, brands and so on. And it was just fascinating. And at this conference that I'm at this week in Las Vegas, trust is also a big part of what folks are talking about responsible AI. And I wonder, talk to me a little bit about what you're learning about trust in AI and trust in these tools, both with your employees, internally, and their willingness to take this stuff on, but also maybe what you've learned with the public about how they're feeling as of today about these machines and what's happening.
Yeah, it's a great topic for us because it's something we spend a lot of time on and something we obviously care quite a bit about. Within the last year, we had done really interesting research around trust in innovation. And essentially, trust in innovation could go one of two ways. It could either become a topic of high trust, so innovation in certain places has been very positive, but in other areas like GMOs, for instance, previously, once trust is diminished, it becomes like a falling knife and it's very difficult to regain it. AI is sitting at the precipice right now. There are essentially groups that trust in AI and there are groups that don't trust, and it's roughly 50-50. What we found, and I think what's most germane to your audience, Boaz, is that essentially if the public believes that AI will be managed and developed competently, they have a much greater propensity to trust the provider than if they believe it won't be handled competently. So what this basically tells me is we as an industry, IT, technology, AI, we have a communication gap, right? We have to be able to tell our story more effectively. We have to be able to demonstrate the use cases of how it's being used competently and to create personal benefit for the user. A lot of the topics also tend to be gray for people in the sense that they don't really fully understand what the benefit is for them. They don't really even fully understand the topic. When you can take it from that 20,000 foot kind of ethereal, strategic level down to something that feels very tactical, but very germane to somebody's individual life or career, it becomes much more positive. We've seen that at Edelman. There is some fear amongst employees that technology will take their jobs or it will, eat into revenue. We ascribe to the philosophy that I'm going to blank on who said it, but essentially, AI will not take your job. Folks using AI will take, and that is really how we think about it. If it's not us, it's going to be some smaller firm that disrupts our business. It's going to be our clients doing it themselves. So we've got to stay ahead of the game.
Let's talk about your clients a little bit. Obviously, you guys have some of the biggest brands in the world that you guys work with. How are you introducing this technology into that workflow? And what's been the feedback? Can you give some examples? I know you can't talk about everything, but can you talk about some deployments that are interesting to you?
Yeah, so we think about when we're working on it specifically internally, right? So not when we're building products and services for our clients to use, but when it's for our support of them, we really have think about it as almost a three-tiered cake. The bottom layer is broad institutional enablement at Edelman. So we have roughly 7,000 employees. We have 99% of them have completed their ChatGPT or Copilot courses. That's both compliance, but that's all, and as well as basic training. And for all of those 7,000 employees, we've created a series of foundational models, we call them, leveraging ChatGPT and Copilot that align to the 26 most common use cases of Edelman employees. So essentially, in those 26 use cases, we've made it much easier for employees to do their basic day-to-day work. The second layer is what we call business group transformation, and that's where we're working with our healthcare sector, or we're working with our crisis team, and we're looking at their use cases and the workflows that support their use cases, and we're designing AI solutions within those workflows to make their work more efficient and more effective. And that becomes obviously really critical because clients are increasingly expecting it, but we also just need to do better and better work for the client. The last layer, the top of the cake, if you will, is what we call account-based transformation. And that's when we're working specifically with client A's team or client B's team. And think about us almost like consultants who get in there over an 8 to 12 week period. We understand the economics of the business. We understand all of the work we do. We understand the time that it takes. We understand the KPIs and benchmarks. And we're essentially redesigning that workflow in partnership with the account team to, again, make the work more efficient and more effective. And we're seeing, in many cases, efficiencies of 60 to 80% in terms of the day-to-day activities. And we're seeing lower error rate. We're seeing higher client acceptance of the work at first or second draft versus going through 5 or 6 drafts. So the early signs are phenomenal that it's not just taking hold from an efficiency perspective, but also from an effectiveness perspective.
And now, before we dive deeper, I want to take a quick moment and tell you a little bit about one of our podcast partners. As a listener of this show, I know you're trying to stay on top of all things AI and tech, which is why you have to check out the amazing GeekWire podcast, produced by GeekWire and hosted by Todd Bishop. It's a treasure of insights featuring industry leaders and the latest tech trends that are shaping our world. It's the perfect companion podcast to Shift AI. GeekWire podcast is where technology meets curiosity and covers the world of technology, startups, and geek culture. Expand your tech horizons and join the conversation. Tune into the GeekWire podcast today, a perfect complement to our own discussions here. Don't miss out. Follow the GeekWire podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite listening app. Before we go further with the interview, I want to tell you about one of our podcast sponsors, Augmented AI Labs, and how they're transforming businesses through intelligent AI solutions. Augmented AI Labs specializes in helping organizations unlock their potential with Gen AI, starting with your most valuable asset, your business knowledge. Their comprehensive process begins by identifying critical workflow challenges and knowledge needs, then building custom solutions that make your company's expertise instantly accessible. The Augmented AI Labs team combines fine-tuning and retrieval methods to ensure your AI solutions truly understand your business context. They thoroughly test and validate each solution, ensuring it delivers measurable value before creating a detailed technical blueprint for deployment. The real beauty of partnering with Augmented AI Labs is that they don't just stop at strategy. They build, deploy, and manage these solutions for you, continuously improving your knowledge systems while you focus on what you do best. If you're ready to transform how your organization leverages AI and knowledge, visit augmentedAIlabs.com and click on the Contact Us button. That's augmentedAIlabs.com. Now back to the episode. You know what I like about the way that you're thinking about this, and we've talked a little bit about this before, is now we have the ability to measure results in a different way than we have before, and set different kind of metrics and KPIs for what we're trying to achieve. And I like that you're attacking the problems first from a business standpoint. We do the same thing at Augmented AI Labs. We're like looking for problems and then trying to really measure value. So can you talk about that? I know it's a big part of the way that you think about these deployments.
Yeah. So I'm gonna talk about the way in which we do it today to a certain extent, and then I'll talk to you about where we're going. So today, a lot of it is around efficiency and quality, and those are relatively easy for us to benchmark because we understand exercise A took 12 hours, and now we can take it down to 2 hours, and we did that 500 times a year, and now we can do it 600 times a year, and we can do it for more cheaply, which means we can re-engineer contracts. But we can also look at things again like error rates. We can get to a final draft more quickly in terms of like less drafts with the client, which means they're happier with the work. Now on the back end, what AI has done is put us in a position to really revolutionize our industry. So, communications has been essentially a sector that has been untethered to business KPIs or traditional financial KPIs in a way that's unlike, for instance, a marketing organization. When you're dealing with people level data in marketing, it's much easier to understand a dollar spent creates $1.10 in revenue or whatever it might be. Or in a call center, you can directly track KPIs and understand whether people buy a product or they don't return a product, and you can do NPS scores, et cetera. Our industry has been driven by things like impressions and views and article mentions. What AI is now enabling us to do is to essentially synthesize or integrate different data sources and to bring those data points together along with financial KPIs so that we can actually start to understand the business value of an earned placement or the business value of a communications campaign in ways in which we think it becomes the big unlock for our client as well as us, improving the business value of what we do so that we can generate more revenue, generate bigger budgets, et cetera. We think this is critical for Edelman, but we also think it's really important for the entire industry.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, obviously people value PR, but when it's hard to measure, intuitively you have to say, okay, this is worth the spend. But now you can be very, very focused on what's working and what's not. I think that's
Yeah,
fascinating.
and when you think about what we do, Boz, I mean, think something like a crisis is a moment where, yes, it's sometimes more simple to quantify because you can look at certain crises and understand the drop in share price or enterprise value. But a lot of the work we do, and you mentioned PR, think about it through also the lens of corporate stakeholders, right? So if we work with a large beverage company, yes, we're talking to specific buying audiences, but we're also speaking to regulators. We're speaking to policymakers. We're speaking to retail investors and institutional investors. We're speaking to employees, right? We're speaking to we're speaking to bottling partners and we're talking to retailers and all of these different groups. So how do you think about a corporate narrative? How do you break down that narrative into its disparate pieces for those specific audiences and understand the impact on all those groups simultaneously? Right. That is something that AI is necessary to do. You're not going to do it with a spreadsheet or a CSV file.
Can you talk a little bit about the way that the people in the business and the AI and machines are working together? I think about the kind of storytelling that you guys have to do. And there's definitely a creative aspect to how you go to market, how you tell your stories. What has changed? I am kind of obsessed with the way that humans and machines work together. And I'm interested in your business, how that plays itself out.
So we see our business, there's a piece, almost like a bifurcation where there's a piece of the business that will, if not be commoditized, it will be automated. And that's just the reality. And 20 people will do the work of 200 people or would be able to do the work of 200 people. In an agentic framework, the process collapses, right? It condenses and the role of process managers become less important. And so you can see that efficiency. But simultaneously, we see the increase in the value of advisory. And I don't mean advisory in the sense of a McKinsey or a BCG necessarily. It could be, but think about a senior creative or a senior strategist on a campaign. They're no longer in the job of managing the process of creating creative. They're in the job of ideation. They're in the job of client discussion, right? They become true creative strategists and advisors instead of being in the job of creative process. And we think that that is going to happen across the board. So my team's job is yes, to like automate our processes, yes, to inject new data and to make everything more efficient and more effective. But our job is also to move into what we think about as accelerated advisory. So can I get intelligence in the hands of a senior executive who knows more about a sector than any client alive so that they can give even better advice and that advice will be even more valued by our clients or by the market. And that's something where AI is going to play the role of providing the intelligence, but the human layer is what's going to essentially be what's valued by the client because that is where the judgment resides.
I'm glad you mentioned that and that idea of having these strategic advisors that are orchestrating what may be people underneath them and machines underneath them and data that's coming at them and they have to make decisions. And I think that's really what a lot of people are going to have to do is to orchestrate a lot of information and a lot of agents, especially if we end up going into this agentic workflows. So it's a good segue because I want to talk about the people who have impacted you, who have been your strategic advisors, mentors along the way.
Yeah, it's a great question. The first is actually somebody I met early in my career. His name is Doug McFarland, and Doug was an early ad tech exec. So I was at DoubleClick, and then at we call Plentroll, and he was running a business called advertising.com. In the .com collapse, there were very few companies that created value. One of them was this company ad.com, and they sold to AOL for like $500 million, which in 2002 or whatever the deal was a huge deal. And he was the first one to help me look at the purely rational side the business. And here's what I mean by that. What ad.com did at the time was they bought advertising from publishers on a CPM basis. So they took the risk away from publishers and they sold it to advertisers on a CPA or CPC, a cost per action basis. And what they built was essentially the intelligence in the middle that understood the specific value of an ad on Yahoo Mail's homepage or on CNN.com's sports page or whatever it might be. And that lesson was important to me. And Doug imparted it to me in the sense that he said, look, at the end of the day, your job is to understand the intrinsic value of what you're looking to trade one way or the other. So in advertising, you're buying, selling advertising. But in communications now, I carry that forward because I talk about it through the lens of essentially information arbitrage. There have been hundreds of billions of dollars spent in optimizing advertising between Google and Meta and other organizations. Essentially, the arbitrage, the delta between expected and created value, maybe a hundredth of a penny. In communications, it's still the frontier, right? It's still a space where if I can find through AI greater intelligence in the value of a particular journalist saying something positive about a brand, or if I understand the value of a LinkedIn post better than a competitor on behalf of my client, or if I understand whether an influencer is actually likely to create purchase intent and trust with a particular audience that matters to our client, that value is so much greater in communications because our competitors aren't doing it, that I can create massive competitive advantage for my clients and in turn for Edelman. So Doug's lesson that I learned many years ago still holds true. Another one is Richard, our CEO, Richard Edelman. So he's been in charge of the company that his father started. He's grown it, I think, nearly 100x since he took over. And this is not advertising for Richard. This is when we first met, he said a couple of things to me, which I thought were really interesting. He said, look, we're a private company. We are largely family held, and we make decisions with the long game in mind. And we have, we don't have debt, we don't have private equity backers, et cetera. And that means as a company, we're making multi-year bets where our competitors are living and breathing by 90-day windows. I just thought that was such an interesting way of thinking about business. He's 70 years old now to celebrate his 70th birthday. We're looking at 3 to 5 year, even 10-year time horizons while our competitors are thinking about the next quarterly update. So
Yeah,
as we
that's
think,
super meaningful.
right? Like you mentioned agentic, we're taking a bet on the agentic path. We're investing in agents. We're investing in the infrastructure. We're investing in the data lakes to make that possible. Now, I can't be certain it will be exactly, obviously, the way that we're mapping it out. In fact, yes, let me flip that. I am certain it will not be exactly the way we're mapping it out, but we're creating the flexibility for ourselves to be right in the long run, even if we're wrong in some short run bets.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's really, really interesting. That's a huge competitive advantage to not have to kind of be in those quarterly cycles and really think long term.
Yeah, let me be clear. It doesn't mean that I don't feel the pressure every day of perform here, but it does mean that, we're not, when we talk about our strategy, right? We're talking about tactics for the next 12 months, but we're thinking 2 years, 5 years out. And it allows you to be more expansive in your thinking, but it also allows you to really connect what you're doing today to some future result and have greater confidence that you can get there.
Perfect, perfect segue to this next element. I always ask the same question at the end of the show. And I want you to describe the future of work and the future, of work with AI in 2 words, and then you can elaborate.
Sure. That is a great question. Curated automation. So I think at the heart of much of what we do will be the role of automation. AI and agents are going to take on a significant portion of the day-to-day activities and the heavy lifting that knowledge workers have been performing, whether you're an engineer or a strategist or an earned media professional. But the curation layer will be the decider between success and failure. So the human curation, the understanding of what the model needs to do, the understanding of what good looks like, the understanding of, you know, when it's right to take something to a client or to make a recommendation, and when you need to go back and ask another question. That is a uniquely human exercise that I don't see going away anytime soon. So I think humans as curators, as advisors, are going to be around for a very long time. I think machines are going to get more and more powerful at the automation layer.
Yeah, I love that view. It's optimistic, but it also takes into account the humans that are behind all of these decisions. And so yeah, I tend to agree with you too. And I hope you're right. I hope that there is a future where we're still relevant and still making decisions, but we're augmented and empowered by these machines in ways that we never thought was possible.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you're seeing it as well, Boaz. We're seeing it in my product development team. We're seeing it in the data science. We're seeing it in our creatives. We're seeing it in I mentioned our earned media professionals. We're seeing it in our crisis counselors. We're seeing it in our researchers. It's pretty uniformly consistent. We're getting to greater levels of efficiency, but we're also seeing the need for that intermediary between the data or the action and what we actually want to take to a client, or what we would actually recommend, or what that finishing touch might look like.
Well, it is exciting times for communications, exciting times for Edelman, obviously. And I really, really appreciate you being on the show, being on the Shift AI podcast. I'm excited to follow and track what you're doing. If folks want to reach out to you and connect, I'm sure you guys are looking for smart people to take on roles within your organization. How do they get in touch?
Brian.Buchwald, Buchwald at Edelman.com. We have a number of open roles on our LinkedIn page. I'm sure you can find them there, but just reach out and would love to chat.
Ryan, thank you. Thank you so much.
Anytime, Boaz. This is awesome. Thank you.
That's a wrap. Thanks for tuning in. What an insightful conversation with Brian Buchwald from Edelman. His journey from ad tech to building Edelman's AI capabilities gives him a unique perspective on how this technology is transforming knowledge work at scale. It was interesting to hear Brian's framework for AI implementation, from broad institutional enablement for all 7,000 employees to business, group, and account-based transformation. His vision of the future as curated automation captures the emerging relationship between AI systems and human expertise. While AI will increasingly handle the heavy lifting of day-to-day tasks, the uniquely human role of judgment, curation, and strategic advisory will become even more valuable. If you're interested in learning more about Edelman's work in AI and communications, you can find Brian on LinkedIn. I continue to be amazed by the guests we've had on the show, and I'm excited about the ones joining us in the near future. I truly appreciate you spending your time with us. Thank you for listening to this episode, and don't forget to subscribe to the Shift AI podcast for more interviews, and to the Augmented Edge newsletter for updates on how AI can help you scale your business. The Shift AI podcast is syndicated by GeekWire, and we are grateful to have the show sponsored by Augmented AI Labs. Our theme music was created by Dave Angel.